welcome back to For the Sake of a Generation podcast. This is Celia Marsh. She is the children's pastor at my church that I go to while I'm in school, and she is a mom of some awesome boys, and just the best. I just love you.
Oh, you're sweet.
Thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited. The Lord, He does mighty things through her, and so I'm excited to see.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So sweet.
Okay, well, first I want to start with the question of the podcast, and that is, if you could say one thing to the next generation of believers, what would that be?
I think I would tell them never to leave his feet. Like to always sit at his feet in his presence, because it's the safest place to be. Like, it's when you're wrapped in his love and you're just encountering him, and when you're near to him, you know, there's no place I'd rather be.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage them, you know, no matter what's going on around them, no matter what they're facing, to just remain in that posture of humility at his feet.
It's good.
There's nothing that he can't do, you know, when you're in that posture.
Yeah. That's good. Reminded me of Mary and Martha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, don't get distracted by, like, the things you want to do, even the things that you think are for him, right?
Yes.
But it's like, just sitting at his feet is always greater.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's always something to do, you know, and discerning what's of him and what's not of him. And in every season, I think, is important. But there's just nothing like just receiving his love and loving him back.
Yeah. That's good. I love that. Okay. I want to start with your salvation story.
Yeah.
Because the first day I ever met you, that was like one of the first things you told me, and I was like, what? Like, it's just crazy to me as like a girl who grew up in the church, and just like people my age just got saved when they got around a certain age, and you know, it was just like so normalized almost.
Yeah.
And so I would love for you to share your story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that, because I'm so intrigued by people who have been raised in the church, because it wasn't my story. And so it's like, I don't know, I always love hearing people's testimonies, and no matter what, I mean, any time that something goes from being dead to alive, right? It's radical.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I didn't grow up in the church. I had really minimal exposure to organized religion when I was younger. And so spiritually, you know, I was just minimal exposure. I did have a friend who in kindergarten I met her, and she did bring me to church a couple times, and she was a witness to me in my life, and that was amazing. I actually called her 3 days after I got saved.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And told her that I'd given my life to Jesus, and so it was really sweet. We're still very good friends.
Wow.
But yeah, it was almost 7 years ago, and it was in the fall. My father was growing really ill, and I've always been a daddy's girl, and so it was really the Lord. You know, he allowed it, and it drew me to the end of myself, because it confronted so many things, and one of those things was that I couldn't control my father's ability to live. Like, I couldn't save him. I couldn't, you know, make him live longer. They were tossing around like multiple diagnoses that were really serious, and so I was unwinding, and I couldn't fix it. Like, you know, I think so many times, like, I was raised to be independent, and so I always tried to do things on my own and in my own strength. And, you know, up until that point, it had worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah.
But with Dad just being so sick, I couldn't do anything about it. And so I remember the Lord brought a woman into my life in that season who had very similar symptoms as to what my father was going through. And I remember, I think it was Thanksgiving, she ended up, sometimes I would go to church with my husband, as much as I did not like to. Every once in a while on holidays I would give in and I'd go to church with him, but she came up to me, I remember one day, and asked me, I had been doing her hair at the salon. That was the Lord that worked that out kind of spontaneously one day. She came in and I did her hair, but she inquired about my dad, and, you know, I shared some things with her, and she had kind of shared some of her, you know, story with her health things, what she had gone through. And so over the course of the next couple months, I think that was November, so it was over the course of the next couple months, she would just check in and, like, ask, how are you doing, you know? And I thought, this is interesting, because she was so kind.
Yeah.
And she didn't know me. She didn't really have any reason to inquire, ask, or follow up, or care, really.
Yeah.
And so the love of Jesus, like, looking back, he was using her, you know, and she just loved so well. She yielded so well and loved so well. And so she's now my best friend. But I ended up asking her, I remember when I was really struggling closer to Christmas, I remember asking her, like, how do you deal with this? Like, how, you know, like, I don't understand. And my father actually, I ended up, my dad ended up meeting her, and they had a discussion about some of the health things that they were going through, and that was my, like, best effort to try to help Dad out, was, maybe if he talks to someone who's going through something similar, or has, like, maybe that he'll find some answers. And I remember Dad asking her, he said, how do you live with this? And she said, we were actually at the salon that day that I owned, and she said, my hope is in Jesus Christ. And I thought, oh no, like, here we go, because I was really vocal about, you know, I don't believe in God. As an atheist, I didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So when I heard that, I thought, oh goodness, here we are, you know. And I mean, I would very openly, like, bash people for I was not kind about it. And so when she said that, I just kind of shrugged it off. But over the course of the next couple weeks, I remember, like, just crying, like, weeping all the time for Dad. Dad was getting worse. And then it came to Christmas Eve. And on Christmas Eve, my husband, he woke me up that morning. I remember the day so vividly. He woke me up that morning, and he was like, "Still, we got to go to church." And I was like, I do not want to go to church. Like, anything else, I do not want to go to church today. And because Christmas Eve had fallen on a Sunday, so we had church service in the morning, and then we had church service in the evening. So there was a double dose that day. So I was really fighting it. So he was like, please, Sarah, like, it's just Christmas Eve. Like, can we just do this for one day? You know? So I got ready. And then after, Bane was about 6 months old. And so I actually spent, like, the entire church service out of the sanctuary, which I was pretty happy about, because I had him. And I could just go cuddle him in the room. But after church, Taylor was like, I need to get Mom something as a gift at Walmart. So we pulled into the Walmart parking lot, and when he went inside, I remember moving from the front seat of the truck, and my boys were on either side of me in the back of the truck, and I moved and sat in the middle, and I just started crying, because it just, all this worry, like, all this anxiety, all this fear, you know, and my lack of control, like, can't do anything, you know, about Dad. And so it was in that moment that I now know it was an open vision, but I didn't know what to call it then. But it was like a movie screen in my mind, and it looked like one of those old-time movie reels where they, like, drop the slides, you know? Yeah. And I saw image after image of things that had happened to me in my life, and things that I hadn't quite been able to figure out, like, why did this happen, you know? Things that were not necessarily the best moments in my life. And at the end of it, I heard a voice, and he said, do you not believe I have a plan for your life? And so in that moment, I'd never heard something like that before so clearly. Yeah. And so it was really, that was the moment when I recognized, oh my goodness, God's real. Yeah. And so I went back home, and I thought, I can't tell my husband this. Like, you know, I can't tell my husband I think God's real. So he ended up coming in the afternoon, and I lost it. I was crying, and I said, God's real, and I heard from him. And I had just had this encounter, you know, in the middle of a parking lot. And then that evening we went to church, and that same woman who had shared, she had slowly shared about her walk in the Lord, and she was vulnerable, and she was willing to share her testimony and tell me. When I remember asking her, like, how do you know he's real? Like, why do you believe in him? And she was like, I can tell you what he's done in my life. Mm-hmm. And it was such a vulnerable place for her to step into, but there was substance there. Yeah. Like, I could see the substance of Jesus, like love in her life, where he had come in and completely transformed her. It was there was evidence, there was fruit, you know, even though I didn't know what to call it. And so that night she walked up to me at the church, and she walked straight up to me, and she said, would you like to pray? And everything in me was like, no, absolutely not. Yeah. And out of my mouth, I said yes. And she took me upstairs to a room, and she said, do you know what to do when you believe in Jesus? And I'm like, nope, I didn't have any Bible experience. I didn't have anything. Yeah. It was by faith. And she led me to Romans 10:9, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead and you'll be saved. And so I prayed that prayer, and my entire life changed so radically after that. It was like a light bulb came off inside of me. Yeah. So
that's so good.
So amazing. It turned on, you know, and lit up.
Yeah, and you told me that story, like I said, the first day I met you, but to hear all the details, like, I can see God in every little part of that. It's so good.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. I've never been the same.
I want to talk a little bit, like, move into kids ministry.
Yeah.
And I want to start first with just, like, how you got there. Going from, I hate people who believe in God, to, like, leading out children the way you do now. I know that it's been, like, step by step. Yeah. So, like, just whatever you want to share from that, I would love to hear.
All right. Yeah. So I owned a salon when I got saved. Yeah. And that I really enjoyed doing hair. I went to cosmetology school my senior year of high school and got my cosmetology licensure. And then when I moved down to North Carolina for college, I continued to do hair and ended up buying my first business when I was 24. And so I had started into the industry, loved it, was super passionate about it, loved doing hair, loved the makeup, all the things. And I loved meeting people and just, you know, getting to know people and hear their stories. And so, yeah, when I got saved, it went from, you know, me playing secular music all the time in the salon, like, just, it was a very different experience. I'd say the salon went through a huge transition. You know, I ended up starting to play, like, just Christian worship music. Yeah. Because, you know, once you, like, man, words have so much power, and once you experience that, like, words of life, you just, like, all the other stuff, it was like, I can't go back. Yeah. So yeah, after a handful of years of owning the salon, I ended up merging with 2 other believers, and that was really beautiful. I really enjoyed owning it with them. And then the Lord, I remember the church that my husband grew up in at the time was a little Baptist church, and I remember that they were in need of a children's director. And so I remember I started to just have these little conversations, was praying with the Lord and just saying, like, God, my children are getting older, so please, like, will you send a director, you know? And he said, I remember one day I was driving and he said, how about you? And I was like, no, sir. Like, that is not where I was going with that. So I ended up having to, I went for another drive a couple weeks later, and I got a phone call, and this person said to me, hey, I was praying about the children's leader at the church, and I swear the Lord told me that it was supposed to be you. And I thought, oh my goodness, now he's telling other people. Like, this is not okay, you know? Yeah. So eventually what happened was, over the course of 2 months, I I continued to do hair. I was like, nope, no thank you. And then I remember one Tuesday night, my books were completely full for the next day at the salon. And I had stacked like colors. And when I woke up the next morning, all but like 3 appointments, there was like a haircut and a couple more like very simple appointments. And so my whole book had dumped within like overnight.
Yeah.
And I thought, what is going on? This is so strange. That rarely happened because I'd been in the industry for a while and usually had back-to-back appointments. And so when I came in the next day, I remember 2 more of those appointments canceled. So I only had 1 tiny appointment in the middle of the day. And I knew, like, I could feel the Lord, you know, it was like the reverence, like the fear of the Lord came on me. And I thought, oh my goodness, I think I might have done something or not done something, right? Like that he wants me to do right now. I just had conviction.
Yeah.
So he told me, he said, you're going to go home and don't come back here today. And so I said, yes, sir. So I went home, and when I walked through the door frame of my house, the Lord started speaking to me about, there's a painting he had me do, and he started to minister. Oftentimes when I'm painting, like the Lord, I just have like deep conversations with him and really love spending time with him in that way. And so he'd been speaking to me about stepping into children's ministry, and he told me, like, you didn't finish what I asked you to do in the painting, you know, and he had shown me what to paint. And so I ended up finishing the painting, and that's when I knew, like, he spoke to me through that. And that's when I knew, like, he was calling me to lead his children. And I had to make a choice in that moment because it's not something I necessarily wanted to do in that moment, but God knew the desires of my heart more than I did. Yeah. And so as I stepped in, it has been one of the greatest blessings to be able to lead his kids. Yeah. And I learned so much from them, just being a mama to all of them. Yeah. And so yeah, it's just been awesome. So good. Yeah. So good. And I think sometimes when we're in a space of like needing to fill a gap, we just fill it with somebody. Yeah. But I love that because that's not what happened. Like, you didn't just, nobody else will do it, so I'll do it. Yeah. It was like the Lord's anointing poured out over you, and that's so beautiful because I can see it. Like, it's so clear to see, like, that this was not, you just did it because it's comfortable or because, like, you wanted to. It's clearly the Lord, and I love that because, like, the children benefit from that greatly because it's all about him. Yeah. And it's all from him. And I think that's so beautiful, like, to come under your leadership, even not as a child, but just as someone who gets to serve with you, is like I know that Jesus is the Lord of that ministry. He's not like a name on the ministry. He's Lord over it. And it's really cool because it's like all throughout this story, like from the moment you got saved, even before, it was like his lordship. He was in control of all of it. He was over all of it, even when you didn't notice, you know? Yeah. And so I just think that's so beautiful. Well, thank you. Yeah. He's so good. He is so good. Okay, so you also write a curriculum for children's ministries. I want to know, I've actually never asked you this, like, I know the Lord asked you to do it, but why do you think that, like, he asked you to do that instead of just using something that was already there? Yeah. So I think that the Lord, he's always pouring out new wine, right? And so for a time such as this, I think he just appointed that time of writing and that season of writing in my life, and it's continual. Like, I'm continuing to write now. And so, you know, I think he's doing work in the body of Christ. Yeah. I think he's maturing us and stretching us and growing us and preparing us for what's to come. And I think there's a massive harvest that's coming. Yeah. And so, I think these blueprints from him, you know, it's in his timing. Yeah. And so I think when he was stirring my heart and when he spoke to me about the curriculum, he was, you know, he had just ordained it. And he was giving me an opportunity to just step in with him and say yes. So it's so exciting. I love it because it's different than, like,
because I've done kids ministry in other capacities, and it's different. It is, this curriculum is, you don't shy away from the things of the Spirit, which I think we do so often with children, because we do it often as a whole church. We've talked about that. Like, it's not even just with children. Like, just the church does that. And that's crazy, number one, to me. Like, as my eyes have been open, I've been like, what are we doing? Like, we're missing half the point here. And I love that you don't shy away from that, specifically with children, because I think sometimes we can feel like, oh, that's too much for them, or that's over their head. But what do you think the Lord is saying? Like, there's a reason he had you do that, first of all, and I see it in them. I see the reason every Sunday morning and Wednesday night. But has he, like, told you anything about, like, why that's so important?
Yeah, I think that he's raising up a generation of children that will be set apart for him and truly consecrated and will burn for him, you know. And I really believe it's for a time such as this, you know. God knew, like, I think about my kids, and he knew when they were going to be born, and he's equipped them to be born for this time. And so, and they don't get a junior Holy Ghost. Like, they get it all, you know. When they receive, they get it all. They get the Holy Spirit when they receive him as Lord and Savior. And so I think that, you know, this verse has come into my mind. His worshipers, they worship in spirit and in truth. And so we can't neglect the word of God, right? So important. But yet the word and the spirit, right, together. Like, and so I'm just so passionate, you know, about following him, and I want that. I desire that for his children, to know him. And so, I don't know. I just think he's hungry for his kids, you know? It's what they were created to do. Like, they're worshiping something, right? But he created them to worship him, like, their whole lives. And so, you know, I think he's bringing his children back to the heart of worship. And, you know, it's him to sit at his feet. So. Yeah.
I think he's gonna, I don't know. I know that he's just gonna use them to do what he wants to do with the church. And it's so exciting. And I think it can be surprising, but then again, it's like, who better? Like, their hearts are so pure. And who else would he use except for his children? I think it's so beautiful, and I'm just so excited to see what the Lord is going to do with children. And I think it's cool to see it at Harvest House, but then when I go home, I get to see it there too, and I get to see, oh, she's anointed, or like, she has this on her, like, that the Lord is calling up his children everywhere. It's not just one place. It's not just even in America. Like, he's doing it all over, and he's going to do such a work through them specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kids, there's not a lot hindering them. Like, they don't walk in a lot of unbelief. They don't really, you know, they don't cling to tradition. And those are two things that can hinder the Holy Spirit. And so I think that it's just beautiful, because they just come to the Father. You know, he says, come to me like a child. And they don't have a problem doing it, you know. They've not been stained by the world. And so it's really beautiful to see how freely the Lord moves in his kids.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the Lord placed it on your heart to adopt a little boy. And I honestly, I don't know how well I know, like, the details of this, but do you want to share that call and just, I don't know, anything about that you want to share?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, so we'll just refer to him as little B. So it was, let's see, I think we're coming up on either it's probably closer to 4 years ago since I had the dream. So I was out visiting my sister. We had actually gone through a local adoption agency to get certified twice for a local child.
Wow.
So we did it the first time, and then I got pregnant. And so, because of the laws, you know, you can't adopt until your baby was 1 year old, I think. So that shut that door. And then we went through it again, and God actually sent us 2 children to live with us that were older. And so yeah, he shut that door again. And then I ended up, we still like had it in our hearts to adopt, but didn't really, we'd already been through it twice.
Yeah.
So yeah, we went out to California to visit my sister on vacation for a couple weeks, and I had a really vivid dream out there. And we didn't really know like which way to go with the adoption stuff. But I had a dream that a little girl came up to me. There was this dirt road, and there was a shack in front of me, and this little girl came up to me and pulled my shirt. And I looked down, and she had little glasses, was blonde, really cute little girl. And she pointed to this house, and all the lights were off in the house. And so I ended up going in the house. The scene kind of changed. I went in the house, and there was this little baby on the bed that had been left, and he'd been abandoned. And I knew there was a window in the house, and I could see the moonlight like coming in the dream, and it was shining on him. And he was just laying there, kind of lifeless, like covered. I could tell he was not well. And then everything went dark in the dream, and I remember running with him in the dream. And I remember hearing myself like running, and I was holding him. And I remember in the dream I was talking to Taylor, and I told Taylor, we can raise him with Elam. And then I woke up. I remember rolling over the next morning, and I said, T. And he was like, yes. And I said, I think we have a son, and I don't know where he is. And so a couple months later, I was in prayer at night, and very similar to when I got saved, I saw him. I had a picture in my mind, an open vision, and I saw him, and he looked much better. He was a little older. He was sitting like up on his forearms. I could see his like striped pajamas. His hair was like combed over, and he looked well. And it was a couple months after that, the woman who had shared the gospel with me, she sent me this website of all these children that were orphans. And I remember when she sent it to me, and they had special needs. And I remember when she sent it to me, I thought, I'm not looking at this. Like, this is going to be so painful.
Yeah.
And so I started to, it was on my phone, and I started to like click off of it. And I remember when I went to click off of it, the Lord said to me, he said, you're a part of the problem. And I thought, oh gosh, that's not good. And so he said, you won't open your heart so you can be a part of the solution. And I realized in that moment, like the fear of the Lord came on me, and just conviction, and the Lord was just moving my heart. And I thought, why would I not look at these children that need loving homes? And so I ended up opening it up, and for 4 nights after that, I wept. There was just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children. And I couldn't help but ask myself, like myself included, like, God, if we profess to know you, and if we have your heart, then how are there all these kids that aren't wanted? Because that doesn't line up with your heart, Lord. And so I remember scrolling. I would think it was 4 days in, I scrolled, and I landed on this. I went past him, and then I pulled it back up and scrolled back up, and there's this little boy, and the Lord said, that's your son. And I thought, oh no, it's kind of like back again where I was, with the salon, like, no, thank you, but and so I remember I scrolled on by. I think I took a screenshot, and I scrolled on by. And then I remember the next morning I woke up, and I pulled up his picture, and I looked like I would just look at him, just look at him. And then I just remember like it would become more and more frequent. And so the Lord would tell me, he would say, show Taylor his picture and ask him if this is his son. And I thought, okay. So I would show Taylor the picture of him, and I would say, "Is this our son?" And he would kind of look at me like, "What?" And then I remember the Lord told me one evening, Taylor was in the shower, and the Lord said, "You're to sit down, and you're to share with him what I've told you." Like, because I hadn't shared with him the intimate details of what I'm sharing with you right now. In that moment, I'd kind of held on to it. And so I shared with him, like, what the Lord had told me about him. And I asked him to genuinely pray about it and ask the Lord. And so a couple of days later, he went to the church that we were at the time. And he came home and he said, "You can apply for him." And he said, "I'm going to pursue this with you, and we're going to adopt our son." And so the Lord, like, I watched the Lord change his heart. And this is before Taylor had completely surrendered. And I still watched the Lord, like, use him and work through Taylor and come into agreement with God's plan. And so there's just nothing too big for him. You know, nothing's impossible. And so Taylor and I started to pursue the adoption. We filled out the paperwork. And shortly after we filled out the paperwork, I asked for photos, because, you know, you can get updated photos of the children sometimes. So I put out a request for updated photos. And the day after I had the vision of seeing him, like, where he looked well and he was a little bit older, I had gone into the salon and I had drawn him, because I felt like I was supposed to do that. And so I sketched him and I wrote a little journal entry of him and I dated it. And when I asked for the updated pictures, it was in March, a couple months later, the person who we were in contact with, they said, "We were not able to get updated pictures of him. Like, we've given you all we have, but we did find his baby picture." And they sent me his baby picture, and it matches the drawing. And so I'd love to share that with you privately.
Yeah,
but
I would love to see that.
Yeah, so it matches the drawing. And so the Lord, I was just blown away. Like, I was just blown away at how big the Lord is, because only he knew. You know, it was only he knew. And so, and only him, like, he could bring something like that to pass, you know. So we've just been continuing to walk by faith. When the war hit in Ukraine, of course, that they stopped all the adoptions. And so we've just been praying for a miracle. We've been praying for God, who everything is possible for him. We've just been praying that he would just unlock the door, and he would make a way to bring him home. So we can't wait. We cannot wait. God's been really faithful to encourage us in big and little ways since then. And we're just walking by faith, not by sight. So
that is so good. And it's just so cool to see, like, the Lord's faithfulness, even though we're not on the other side of it yet. Like, but to be so confident in it, it's awesome. But I wanted to ask you, you have 3 boys already. You're adopting another little boy. And you love the girly things. We were just talking about it.
Yes.
Why do you think the Lord keeps sending you boys?
So I actually asked, I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but it was 2 or 3 weeks after my last son, Elam, was born. And I remember I was sitting on my bed, and I had asked the Lord for a daughter, you know. And he continued to give me boys, which has been equally such a blessing. But I asked him, I genuinely wondered, like, Lord, you know, I have 2 sisters, so we were, like, we outnumbered with girls in our family. And I said, Lord, why do you keep giving me boys? And he said, I'm raising up a new generation of men in my name. And so it was in that moment that I thought, wow, like, what an honor. You know, to be able to love them and to raise them, you know, and to be entrusted with them. So I had the same question.
I know, and I think I've talked to you about this before, but a lot of times in kids ministry, it's like I have this connection with like the boys, and I'm like, this is so weird, and like I feel like other people think it's weird, and I'm like, oh, I don't know like what is happening, but the Lord is like constantly puts it in my face, and he constantly does it, and it's not me forcing it. It's like the children, like your boys, like Harlan loves to just like, he draws near, and it's like, it's so the Lord, and I've always been like, why Lord, and when you told me that the other week when I was at your house, and I was like, he's raising up a new generation of men, and like, and I think also it's hard because that generation is not the generation above them. The generation above them does not have what they need. Like, and like some guys do, you know, but I think that like for right now, that's why. Like, I don't know. I feel like the Lord uses us to raise them up so that they can raise the next generation of men.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there should be like a spilling over, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that the Lord is doing such a beautiful work in the body right now, because I'm seeing mothers and fathers heed the call.
Yeah.
You know, like I've been blessed by spiritual mothers and fathers, and the Lord will bring them into my life. It's like he handpicked them, you know, and they have the mother's heart. They have the father's heart, you know, father's heart for their children.
Yeah.
Like they serve just sacrificially and love well. And so, you know, I think God intended for that to be passed on generation to generation, and to be more, you know, generation to generation. And so I really see like the Lord, I think it's in Malachi, where he's turning the hearts of the fathers to the children, you know? And so I think he's doing a unique work in this season. And I think there's so much benefit on either side, you know? Like children, you glean from the wisdom of the older generation. And I think the older generation, you know, with the youngers, they're full of zeal, you know, like they're full of zeal and just hungry, but you know, we don't always know like what to do with that. And so yeah, it's been a beautiful season to see the Lord knitting that, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it with the boys and the daughters, the sons and the daughters. So
it's so exciting. Wow, the Lord is doing something so new, and it's so exciting. I just feel like we're on the cusp. The other night at like college ministry, James was preaching, and it was so good, and I was like, I can't sit still. It was like we were on the cusp of breakthrough. And I feel like that's kind of where we are right now. Like across the globe, it's like we're on the cusp of breakthrough. And the Lord is gonna bring it to stay. Like not just for one night. And it's so exciting because it's in the children, but like you said, it's also in the generations above us. It's cool. Like I've seen my parents change, and like the Lord is doing a work in them just as he is in me, just as he is in the littles. Like he's doing a work in every generation, and it's like we're right on the cusp of breakthrough. And it's just so exciting to hear that like you also see that in parents, like in fathers who are starting to like, their hearts are being realigned, literally, because it's like the Lord is like, this wasn't what I intended, like, and just molding it and shaping it, and he's doing it in like each specific person, but he's just doing it in the church.
Absolutely. I think what I'm learning is like the kingdom, like our spiritual family in the kingdom is so vast, you know. And I think about when Jesus outstretched his hands and asked, like, who are the fathers and the mothers and the brothers and the sisters, right? And it's those who belong to the kingdom. And so, you know, it's a good reminder to me that even if I didn't have my own kids, that I'm entrusted with that to mother the children, the sons and daughters that the Lord puts before me. I have a responsibility in the kingdom to mother them. And so there's a place for everyone in that, you know, to be a son or daughter, and to be a mother or father, you know? And so I love how his kingdom works. It's just beautiful.
He's doing such a new thing. Well, that is the end of my questions. This episode was awesome. Like, it's so cool because I feel like sometimes it's like so back and forth, but this was like just your testimony, I feel like, and it was so powerful, and the Lord is going to use it to do a mighty thing for the children and for the adults alike. Like, I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Thank you for this opportunity.
I appreciate it. Thank you for letting us use your home too.
Yeah,
it's so
absolutely.
sweet.
I just pray he gets all the glory.
Yeah,
he's so good and he's so worthy, and yeah, bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. I bless you. We love you guys. And next week we have an extra special treat for y'all. We'll be back in their house again. So get ready for her kiddos. They're awesome and you're going to love it. So tune back in next week. But we love you guys and we bless you and bye.